Hi, in this video I want to talk about misconceptions in Azur Lane, and for that reason I'm showing you footage of World 2.2 and a comparatively under-leveled fleet. The average level of this fleet is level 10, and as you know, on World 2.2 the fleets that you face at the start are level 14. And conventional wisdom dictates that you want to be several levels higher than the fleets that you will be facing. Now as you watch the footage, you will see that this under-leveled fleet is perfectly capable of tearing its way through a much higher level enemy fleet. And not only that, it can come out of the combat suffering hardly any damage at all. Now obviously I will be speeding through the rest of this, but I just wanted to show you just how quickly they can clear through the burst mode. So that was real time. Now there's actually two reasons why it can do this. And these two reasons come down to the biggest misconception in Azur Lane at the moment. And that basically is this: ships are important. Well, they're not. Now let me clarify this, because ships are important, but the individual ships themselves are not. And that is where people are getting it wrong. Because a lot of people will say, this is the best ship, this is the best ship, this is the best ship, and that's the best ship. And they will put them all into one fleet without thinking about what they are doing. So you can have a totally and utterly mixed fleet of all gold SSRs, all gold super rare ships, and it will not work. And it's important to know why. Now if you look at the fleet I'm running, I have a blue rare ship, a grey normal ship, and a purple elite ship. These three scout ships are doing the bulk of the damage. They are also tanking most of the damage. In the main fleet I do have two purple elite ships and one blue rare ship. And there is not a single gold super rare ship anywhere in sight. And actually that's the entire point of this fleet, because there's some people that have probably noticed that this is the low cost Fletcher farming fleet. And the entire point of this fleet is that it allows you to farm high-end maps with a very low oil cost. And the way you do that is you do not limit break the ships. You just get them to level 100 and you just run them as they are. And the equipment that you put on these ships is extremely important, and that nicely links up with the next point. There are two reasons why this fleet works. There's the synergy between the ships, and then there is the equipment on the ships. Mastery of this basic concept will help you in the game, especially in the later stages of the game, and it'll help you overcome any obstacles that you should encounter within the game itself. Unfortunately, I keep hearing stories about people who keep re-rolling their account because in the initial opening crafts they keep getting ships that they think aren't ideal and won't help them progress through the opening worlds. So they just re-roll and re-roll and re-roll until they get something that they think is perhaps ideal and better for them, under the mistaken belief that individual ships will make a bigger difference than anything else. Now obviously I've switched the video footage here, and this is actually my tutorial fleet from the tutorial videos, and they are actually at a higher level than the Fletcher farming fleet because I do not have any equipment on them of any worth, and they have no synergy, so they are actually having to run under the common wisdom of they need to be of a higher level than the map that you're wanting them to actually clear. Now as an aside, I do hope my tutorial videos have shown that you can progress up to World 2.1 and past that using whatever ships that this game throws at you, just through random drops and random crafts. While it is true that you do want to be farming for certain ships, and you do want to cross your fingers and hope that you do get certain crafts, it's even more important that you do the daily raids for tech boxes, as well as checking the shop and seeing if there are tech boxes on sale. And then as long as you've got the in-game coin for it, you buy those. Also, you can spend spare PvP tokens on tech boxes if you're wanting to. Now obviously, to get the most out of your ships and the equipment, you need to optimize the loadout, and that is something for another video. But briefly, with an optimized loadout, you could turn a rare ship or an elite ship into the equivalent of a super rare ship if that super rare ship was not given a good loadout. Equipment, along with synergy, also allows you to surpass the current level of your ship. An interesting aside here, Indianapolis is actually level 40. Now, the rest of the fleet is around level 20. But you'll notice that Indianapolis is taking damage and she's struggling to actually clear through the fleet. Again, this is because she's got very poor equipment, she's not given a limit break, and she has no synergy with the rest of the fleet. So I cannot overstate just how important equipment and synergy are in a fleet. Because if common wisdom stood true, if all the misconceptions were accurate, then a level 40 Indianapolis, even though she's designed for tanking and not for DPS, would be tearing through a low level 14 ship, because she's a purple elite ship, therefore she's special, right? And she's level 40, so she's got such a huge gap on top of all these other ships. But she's not tearing through them all. So just think about that for a moment. If an underleveled Fletcher Fleet can defeat a boss in under 40 seconds, and an overleveled Indianapolis fleet takes over 1 minute to defeat the same boss, that means there must be something else going on. That ship levels and ship types do not really matter. Now, this would mean looking at the fleets in detail. But as I've already said, the tutorial fleet has no synergy and no equipment. So looking into them beyond this is pointless. So let's look at the Fletcher Fleet. Now, my Fletcher Fleet isn't fully optimized at the moment because I am currently starting them out and I am currently using the equipment that I have spare, and I do intend to upgrade it as I can, and my main fleets take a priority. However, the main gun is a reasonable DPS for a gun, and the toolbox is optimized for the Fletcher Fleet. So in terms of equipment, those two are spot on for what she needs. As you can also notice, the level of the equipment is much higher than you would expect on a fleet of this level, which is one of the reasons they were able to dominate so much. But that would only explain the increased damage output. This is where Fletcher's skills come in and the synergy that she gives to the rest of the scout fleet. Her main skill increases the firepower and, importantly, the evasion of the rest of the Fletcher class destroyers. Her second skill increases firepower, torpedo strength, and the rate of fire of all destroyers in the fleet. For Charles Osborne, I made sure that I gave her a really fast firing gun. It doesn't have quite as good of DPS as some of the other destroyer guns, but its rate of fire is such that it will trigger her skills. I've also given her the toolbox, of course. She has a chance upon firing her main gun to trigger her skill, which will increase the fleet's movement speed, as well as the evasion of the scout fleet. She also has a chance to increase her own firepower for 10 seconds. Orlick here is a prime example of an under-optimized ship. I don't have a better gun spare, and I don't have better auxiliary equipment spare, so that's why she's set out as she is. Her skill is also underwhelming because it's simply a chance to increase her own reload stat. Unicorn, again, it's what I've got spare. You want fast launching planes and you want double gold catapults, because every time she launches her planes it will heal the front row, and her other skill is that she will increase the reload of the front row escort fleet. Show her again, you want fast launching planes because, like Unicorn, she heals the front line, but I did run out of auxiliary equipment, so that's why those are blank. Erebus. Again, a lack of equipment has come into play here, but the main reason I'm taking her is for her special skill, which is a special barrage that comes firing out, and it attacks all enemies in front of her and does a lot of damage to them. So you see, the truth behind this fleet isn't just the equipment, it's really the skills and how they blend together. For example, you've got Fletcher. Her main skill is that all Fletcher class destroyers will have a firepower increase and an increase in evasion. Whereas the entire front line is made out of Fletcher class destroyers, they're all going to benefit from the skill. Charles Osborne, her skill is going to increase the movement speed and the evasion of every single ship in the front line. This is why they're able to survive so well, because they're getting an insane amount of evasion, so they can pretty much evasion tank all of the early maps. They've got a really good speed, so you can manually dodge through most that comes at them, and what you can't dodge, they're going to evade. As for the damage, it's not just down to the equipment. They've got skills between them that are increasing the rate of fire, and are also increasing the amount of firepower that they have. So this all boosts their DPS. Another fleet with synergy is the meme fleet. You've got Wichita that increases the firepower of all cruisers, you've got Cleveland which will increase the firepower of the entire fleet, and you've got Helena which will increase the amount of damage taken by the enemy fleet. This gives them an extremely high damage output, much higher than they would have on their own. For another example of synergy in action, let's turn to PvP. So with this fleet, it doesn't actually have that great a synergy going on. Yes, we've got a pairing of Akagi and Kaga. Okay. We've also got a partial meme fleet. I wouldn't be surprised if this person simply looked at a tier list of the top ships and put together a fleet from that, because they've not really considered how they would work together. Now pay attention to the rating, because this is another reason why ratings are a load of rubbish. If you notice, my rating is lower than the other guys, therefore I should automatically lose this fight. However, I'm using a Royal Navy fleet. I've got Queen Elizabeth in my fleet, and she's going to increase the power of my entire fleet. This is the synergy of the Royal Navy fleet. Much of my front line here is actually for levelling purposes. However, the lucky thing of having Ajax is that I am going to be facing 2 heavy cruisers, so she'll get to do a little bit of damage. So, as we go into the battle, the one thing I will say is watch for the opening airstrikes from Kaga and Akagi. That is the main threat to the front line, and if you'll notice, the front lines here are fairly even. So in comes the airstrike, it totally messes up my front line, and fortunately my back line takes out Akagi. Warspite is now on low health, and my front line has now just been reduced to Javelin. But their front line isn't in the healthiest of states either. Hood is able to take out much of the front line down to Prince, Javelin falls down, and I'm now down to 2 battleships, and they've only got Hood and a almost dead Kaga. So there we are, totally taken out their fleet. So based on numbers alone, I should have lost that fight. I should have lost it relatively easily. However, I didn't, and that's because my fleet had the better synergy. You see, the numbers on PvP take into account the ship stats and the equipment that you've got on the ships. What it doesn't take into account is the synergy between the fleet. So you can put all your best ships onto the fleet and it'll boost up your number. But it means absolutely nothing if your fleet doesn't have synergy. As you just saw, that fleet I just faced against didn't have sufficient synergy to take on a fleet that was of a lower stat and come out on top. So the point of this video is to simply say, when you're crafting your fleet, Consider how the skills and how the ships are going to mesh together. It's no good just to look at a tier list of the top ships and choose the ships based on that, because unless they are actually going to mesh, it's not going to do you any good. It's not going to benefit you in the later levels of the game. So consider the skills when you're forming your fleet, and don't be really obsessed and blinded by chasing after the top tier ships, because even low tier ships can really shine if they have the right synergy and equipment. So that's it for this video. I hope this has been informative and you have found it beneficial. So, bye for now.